This is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
This is Father Joseph Anthony Kress.
Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks for all those who listen and subscribe to the podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you find your podcast, consume your materials, or just driving along the car with us at this moment, or riding a train, or on a plane, or wherever you are. If you would like to donate, please do so on patreon.com/Godsplaining. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, you could do that. Monthly donation. Thanks so much for that. So wherever you listen to your podcast, we're happy to have you here. This is a Livesplaining episode, which means that if it's a particular time in the week, at a particular time in the day, it is a Livesplaining. That's us. So I'm here with Father Joseph Anthony, and we are here to talk about Lent. It's the 5th week. We're moving into the final one there. So how's Lent been going for you so far, Father Joseph Anthony?
I don't know. I always hit this point in Lent, and I'm always like, I could have done better. I kind of got through it. I did kind of what I was hoping to do, but I probably didn't do as best as I could have with Lent. I always struggle right around this part of the year. It's like, well, Holy Week's here. I'll double down on Holy Week to make up for all of the kind of not so fun stuff that I did this past year, or not this past. I didn't make the best out of it, so I'll double triple down on the Holy Week to make up for it all. So I don't know. I feel like I'm in that same spot right now.
Yeah, I don't think that's an unusual feeling for people. It's also not an unusual feeling for me. I always kind of feel like you could do more, and you did your, maybe if I could have picked more penances, or I did pretty well on them, but one time I just didn't do the thing I was supposed to do, or said I wasn't going to do. Just getting my widow's peak sorted out here. This is crazy. Okay, and then
was that your Lenten penance right there?
Yeah,
sorting
exactly.
out the widow's peak.
Sorting out the widow's peak. But the nice part, I think there is something good about the crash, kind of the Palm Sunday that's coming up this Sunday, that just says, all right, now focus, set your face to Jerusalem. I love that phrase in the scriptures. Ooh, yeah. And now it's time to be serious. And whatever you've done up to here was preparation, prolegomena, and everyone meets you at this point, and we're all in this final Holy Week. So in a sense, the church, I take it the church liturgically or something has this appreciation of the fact that in the modern world, you might get distracted. I mean, we're busy. Yeah, we're not just in a monastery. I take it if you're living just in a monastery as a monk, it's easier to not get distracted during Lent, but to keep everything focused. Whereas for us who are doing different things, you're traveling around. It's, you have to meet with people. You're still doing everyday kind of stuff.
Life kind of continues, and
it's that's right. And there's certain elements to it. Like I wear a capo when I'm teaching this Lent, so when I know it's got this kind of heaviness to it in a way, and do some other practices to make it clear every day that it's Lent. But this is the Holy Week is the go time. So for sure. I think that's right. But we talked about the theme, at least, is perseverance, because there are also some people. There could be other side of things that it's 5th week, 5 weeks in. Advent is Advent's shorter, so Advent just kind of rock, and Christmas is so great, and you get pretty close to that. Whereas Lent can be, depending on what time of the season it falls, I find, whether it's more in February or more into April or something, it can be kind of lugubrious and kind of, come on, get it over with it or something. So perhaps maybe it's not this year is your time, but perhaps what about this virtue of perseverance, and how does that affect, or how does that work into Lent, would you say?
I think Lent is kind of unique because it is 6 weeks long, and by that point you kind of get into a rhythm. You're like, oh, this is the new rhythm. Fast or not eating meat on Fridays, which you can do all year long, but definitely during Lent, or your penances, and you're kind of like, oh, this is the new normal. This is my new kind of rhythm of life, and you kind of then slip into the malaise of that. And I think the idea of perseverance is to say, no, let me still be intentional with these things. Let me not just take them for granted of this is the new fabric of my life now because I've been doing it for 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I think, what is it? The age-old saying is it takes 21 days to break a habit or something like that. So if you've done something for 21 days, you're like, okay, now I've broken my previous habit. Now I'm building this new one. And the gift of perseverance is to still be attentive and not to take these Lenten practices, the increase of prayer, the increase of penance, the increase of almsgiving, to be this okay, this is now the new normal, and to then just be kind of let it be mediocre. So I think the challenge is to persevere in Lent well, in such a way that you're still being very intentional with these penances and still being intentional with your Lenten practices, so that you can end strong and end well, and not just be like, well, it fell apart, or this is just kind of the new rhythm and now it's baseline. It's like, no, it still needs to be this kind of intentional engagement, instead of just, now it's more from this super intentional kind of like Lenten engagement, and now it's just baseline type of a thing.
I like that. Yeah, you get kind of used to the new rhythm, you could say. So, for instance, if I used to do this, I used to give up cream and in milk and coffee. So I just drink coffee black.
Right.
And then but now I drink coffee black. I got used to it at some point, so it was no longer a penance. It's just kind of a thing you do. And so you can imagine like that happened over a couple Lents. And then it's like, well, can't give this up anymore because I like black coffee now. And you can have the sense of, well, now that's no longer a penance. It's just kind of the thing I do. And we could, maybe that could be true if you like, if you're pumped about cold showers, then you're like, I actually kind of liking this thing. It's good to change.
Do a cold plunge now, and that's become your new morning routine. And
steaming hot showers, burn the body. But
oh my gosh,
it's good to say like, what's the that would be an awful penance, just a horrible. I mean, that's even worse than cold showers. I think that might actually be dangerous. So
we are not recommending that. That is not an official.
Don't drink Clorox bleach. Don't do that.
Don't eat Tide Pods.
Yeah, exactly. Don't do any of these things. Don't such as So we don't know any more about this. But there is the intentionality I like, because the point of the penances, I remember I was giving a talk earlier this right at the start of Lent about what do we do with these mortifications? What's the point of these? Is to detach us for attachment to Christ. And the reason why you're doing these penances ideally is not to lose weight or to just punch the body, or to get finally organized, or drink coffee like a man, that kind of thing, but rather to see that you need Christ and that you think about him and his love for you by these small acts. Like they're supposed to be, just like he wielded the cross out of love and obedience, so we wield our penances out of love and obedience. And so if you've forgotten that kind of thing, if Lent's become a kind of new normal for a bit, or if the penances have just been another thing you took on, and now they feel normal again, I think it's good to say, by this point, or and Palm Sunday, it's like, now remember, I'm doing these penances particularly to think about Christ. Right. So that when I'm not having this, or when I feel this but not having this, or I feel hungry but not eating between meals, or I whatever it might be, you're doing that for the sake of Christ. It's supposed to direct you to Christ, and so to again reattach him to those moments. And remind yourself that these are meant to be springboards to him, not ends in themselves. They might have become that, or just become something going under the radar screen. So that's nice that we'd re-weaponize them, I could say. I guess take them for a tune-up and re-weaponize these guys for an attachment to Christ. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing, is like when we do penances and stuff, it's supposed to detach us from certain comforts maybe that we are attached to in this life to a certain respect, so that we can be more attached to the Lord, not to detach ourselves or to punish ourselves, so that we just create a void in our life and just like sulk in that and be like, I'm miserable because I gave up cream and sugar in my coffee. It's like, no, like we're reminding ourselves that we're not built for this art life, in the certain sense that like our destination is in heaven with the Lord. And so I'm going to withhold these certain things so that I can be more attached to Christ at the end of the day. And so when we're talking about the gift of perseverance, like Lent kind of takes like perseverance. Advent is quick. It's 4 weeks. You're kind of like 2 weeks into this, and then like life kind of slowly shuts down, and all the Christmas festivities kind of begin a little earlier every single year and all this. And like, even though I think Advent's like my favorite liturgical season, it doesn't really demand a lot from you in that sense. Lent does. And like, to really persevere through the entirety of the Lent, through all 40 days with your Lenten practices, like it really does take a gift of perseverance. And that is to be mindful for us that the entirety of our earthly life, whether it's 40 days or multiple decades here on this earth, like it takes perseverance to finish this earthly journey well. And so to do that every year, in a small sense of like, oh, it would be easy to give up my Lenten practices after 5 weeks when I didn't really maybe do them the best I thought. It's like, no, like to persevere well and to continue on and to not give up in Lent is reflective of how we are to live this entire Christian life.
Yeah, I like this. This is there's constant like reflections on how we are to live in a particular way. The liturgy is meant to help us to live the whole life, and we get little vignettes of it. That's why, for instance, I take it the liturgical year is continuously repeating the same cycles. You know, you get to hear the same stories because they're supposed to be little in life in nunce in like this small sense, so you can see them. And I think perseverance is a good one. I was going to turn to the same point, but we. Backbencher minds think alike.
Hey.
That like perseverance, it's good to practice this perseverance now, not just for Lent kind of things, but for the end of our lives. Because I mean, we live with older Dominicans too, and this is the thing we all face. The point of life is to one of the points of life, and especially philosophy, but thinking about it is to have a sense of preparing for death, being able to do that well, to die well. We pray for a holy death, St. Joseph sort of thing. This was a common thing. Cardinal Bellarmine wrote a great treatise on the art of dying well. You might think today it's the art of living well, but the art of dying well was a thing that you would write at some point in your life if you were a theologian or a saintly figure or something, kind of meditating on preparing for death. And this is what we're all preparing for, the perseverance at the end, because some of us might be suffering in a sort of enforced Lenten penance at the end of life, you could say, just by the way the body works and the way history. And we know people like this, and that's a slog. But maybe see these kind of Lenten practices each year as not themselves ends in themselves, but rather preparing for that potentially great Lenten penance that'll be involved. And who knows how many? Could be 5, could be a year, could be 6 months, could be 2-3 years. I mean, we see a lot of people who just suffer through at the end, and it's beautiful to see the grace-filled suffering. And it's kind of tragic to see those, and it's to see someone who doesn't suffer well at the end, and that we pray for not only a good death and a good way to come to death, but also that we work on the virtue of perseverance as a virtue and as a gift to be able to do that well, and kind of just practice it. Take out sharpen the knife each year or something. I like that. That's a good model and a good point to remember.
Yeah, and I think like in our life, we have kind of a beautiful experience of both engaging in personal Lenten practices, but we also have communal Lenten practices, right? Like each priory has a conversation amongst the brothers themselves and decide on certain Lenten practices to keep us mindful of the season we're in. And I've always found that very I don't know, maybe invigorating is not the best word, but I've always found that very beautiful that like we as a community will take on certain Lenten practices and penances. And I've always found those are a lot easier to persevere in when you're doing a Lenten practice together as a community, right? And then that also helps keep me mindful, because there's sometimes like I've slacked off or maybe haven't been as intentional with my own, increases of prayer or almsgiving. But let's say if I know we do silent meals with readings in the refectory every night, then every night I go to dinner, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still in Lent. Like I forgot to do whatever I told myself I was going to do this morning, but like, oh no, it's still here. So the kind of communal penances and a way that we keep each other as brothers accountable has kind of the knock-on effect that keeps my personal Lenten practices, keeps them accountable, and helps to encourage me in my own personal perseverance as we are a community, as a priory, persevering through the season as well.
Yeah, I think this is good, doing things in community. I mean, the early church has this reflection. Of course, this is the letters and the scriptures where to encourage the brothers and such. So even if we're in the family, doing things, having some Lenten practices as a family, whether it be in the church communities, those are all helpful when we kind of flag a bit, because we want to, sometimes we're going to give breaks on ourselves, but we want to do best for others. It's a natural tendency. I like that. So weaponize that psychological desire as well. Okay, so we hope that everyone's getting ready to persevere for Lent, not only for this Lent, but also for preparing for death, because we're going to have to do it at some point. All right, enough of that. But let's get to some questions. Here we go.
Hey-o,
hallelujah. Livesplaining at the same time as Father Pine's Pint episode airs. Oh my. Do you want us to be torn and choose which Dominican we don't we like, don't you? We don't want you to be that. That's why everyone is watching Father Pine. Now, to be fair, this is a live episode, and his I don't think is a live episode. In fact, I can assure you it is not a live episode because I was just with him a couple minutes ago. But in any case, we will not hold it against you.
Dude, you're pulling the curtain back. Like, yeah, you're supposed to say, like, he's bilocating. We all know he's
we will
not
not
holy.
hold it against. We will not hold it against you if you go to such thing, and that's why Ipso Brazzo says, "Hallelujah! It's the Lent after all, so we must make sacrifices." That's it. There we go. All right, now a real question from Patreon person. Any advice on how to ask thought-provoking questions to a loved one who doesn't believe? Annie, that's a great question, Annie. I assume by thought-provoking questions you mean like about the faith. Instead of like hands clapping in the wilderness or something. To get
trees
them
falling in the forest,
trees falling
right?
with no one. To get them to kind of stoke, maybe push those little kind of fomes, the little embers of potential belief, and that what kind of questions or what way can you get in with that? Father Joseph Anthony, do you have any kind of go-to recommendations you have, or is this really kind of individual prudence matter? What are our general kind of principles here?
Obviously, prudence is going to be the queen of all virtues, right? Right reason with respect to
charity,
action.
But
so well, thank you. But prudence is obviously going to be involved, and you don't want to be at the dinner table and be like, "Hey, pass the potatoes." And by the way,
this looks
have you
like
ever
hell.
thought about God? But there can be times where it's like, hey, if it comes up in a conversation, there's a difference of like lifestyle or things like that. To have that kind of conversation, one of the things that I always like think is a nice way to do it, because it shows respect for the other person without being like super antagonistic, but it's like recognizing that there is a difference of a belief. Like, hey, I believe, the Catholic faith, and obviously you don't. Would you mind sharing with me like why you believe that? I think far too often we probably get into the mode of argument, and we're arguing conclusions to conclusions, and it's much easier to be able to kind of roll that step back a few ways to find where there is a common belief, and then where the points of difference are. So sometimes it's better to just be able to say, hey, obviously you believe this on, whatever hot button issue, and you believe X, I believe Y. Would you mind like describing to me, like, okay, roll it back. Like, I'm sure there's reasons you've come to that conclusion, and I'm interested to know, why it is, because you're a smart person and you're not an idiot, and I respect that. So I would love to find the reasons why you've come to that conclusion, and I'm happy to share with you the reasons I've come to another conclusion. And sometimes I can open up more of a conversation instead of just arguing against conclusions in order to quote unquote win somebody over to my side. But it becomes this more like, actually, I want to know a little more about you in that way.
Yeah, and it also depends, I suppose, on the background of, or the story of the person who doesn't believe. Like, is this someone who just never believed? And that's different. You can offer like, hey, I was reading this thing, or I was thinking about this, or hey, have you ever heard of this guy, or have you seen what the Pope's been doing, or I really like this part. So if it's someone who has no affiliation, then you can share things in a sort of spontaneous way, you could say.
Yeah.
If it's someone who's, for instance, has lost belief and left the church or something, or has given up on it, or this kind of stuff, then it's a little different. You have to approach it with a little more care, I suppose, and gentleness. But there might be opportunities around certain events, like, if you're going to church on Easter, for instance, you might what basically, does it come up in a sense of life? Like, does it come up in a way that's organic to your life? Like, hey, I'll be over, but I'm going to, I got back from the Easter Mass of Easter Vigil, or this, I'm doing the Station of the Cross. I really love these things. That kind of stuff. Like, bring it up and see if it provokes a question. But it has to be organic in the sense of what you're doing with that person, how you're interacting. If it's a person you live with, that also changes it a bit.
Right.
Because you, on the one hand, have much more opportunity to talk about it, but on the other hand, you want to be careful about those things. But it's a little bit easier where if it's a loved one who's far away, then it's a little bit trickier. I guess you always want to ask yourself, what's the motive here? Like, what are you going for? Obviously, you want this person to be brought into the fold, or back into the fold or something. And the question is then to think, how how do I do that in the most human and familial way? Even inviting someone. Sometimes it's easier, instead of talking, inviting them to a particular event, to one of,
yes,
especially with the big liturgies that come up here, they are beautiful. The Catholic Church does the nuptial mass is beautiful, the wedding mass, and then the Triduum and our big feast days. They're just gorgeous. The mass is always beautiful, but these are special days. There might be enough strangeness, enough that you might be able to invite them to one of these events, either Holy Thursday or to adoration time, or it's a Good Friday or a stations thing. It might be a little too intense. But there might be a way to invite them to something, or a talk, or a Lenten reflection, or an Easter sort of thing. And that kind of, if the person is believed before but doesn't believe anymore, that might be a way in, as opposed to just like having a direct conversation. Have it in terms of some event.
Yeah, and I always go back to it. I know I've said this 1,000 times on the podcast, but the fact that we are in an apostolic mode of the church, and Monsignor Shea's, like, one of his key phrases is, in an apostolic mode, you cannot impose via authority, but you have to invite into a relationship. Like, and so
it's
that
a winning
kind
attraction.
of thing, to invite them to join you. And it's not invite like, hey, you should come to this mass on Easter because this is your Easter duty and you need to do it. But it's like, hey, come join me. I'm going to Easter Sunday Mass. Like, I'd love it if you join me. Would you join me here? But also that same type of a thing with the conversations, like, invite to a conversation about this, and not just like to impose the conclusions without understanding the other aspects of it. And there are different opportunities for that. I really liked how you said, just like letting the opportunities of a daily life, or a rhythm, like letting opportunities of life present the occasions to have these conversations, instead of, hey, do you have a minute to talk? I would like to talk about the Jesus with you because you're a pagan. And it's like, let's not lead off with that.
Just gotta come up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Next one. St. Francis de Sales says in Treatise Love of God, book 9, chapter 4, the truly indifferent soul would prize hell more with God's will than heaven without it. I am all tangled up with fright, don't do that, and confusion with this quote, with the Dominican friars untangled at slow money time. Sure, I'll give it a go with this. So this is, what should we say? Francis de Sales is the Bishop of Geneva. He's in charge right around Theodore Beza, so just after Calvin. So he's involved in a lot with the Calvinists at this point. So that might set up some of this, but there is a sense of, and this later turned into, you could call the pietist kind of crisis, the quietist crisis, the sense in which he's trying to make clear that we love God's will more than any results, right? So we love, and this, so that we then Dante says, like, it's his will that moves the stars in the sky. It's the will and his love that we care about, not like our own salvation first and foremost, in the sense that charity, the divine love of God, the love of God in and for himself, is greater than hope. Hope is the promise for us. And so, nonetheless, with all of these quotes he has, and Paul does this, by the way, too. So St. Paul has this kind of things. He says, if I could be damned for the sake of the Jews, I would do it. And you think, whoa, my gosh. But he has, and it's always with a little phrase called per impossibile, like, if it were possible, right? But it's impossible. And this is, I think, so it's a sentiment phrase. So the truly indifferent soul would prize hell more with God's will than heaven without it. Per impossibile. Like, obviously that's impossible. But the gist of it is in the sense that you care more about God's will being done than your good in heaven. Now, God's will, right, I take it, if you will his will above all things, directly, is that, that's what heaven is. And Satan doesn't will God's will above all things, quite the contrary, even though he does do God's will above all things in his life. That's just how it goes. Right. But like the will is for him. So if these were separate, right, it's essentially, there's this wonderful quote from Dostoevsky where he says, if I've discovered that Christ was outside of the truth, I would choose to be with Christ rather than the truth. And that sounds insane, but you have to take it as rhetorical emphasis in that Christ is the truth truth isn't Christ first and foremost. It's not like the truth and then Christ falls under the truth. Christ is the way, the life, and the truth. It's not like truth is floating up in there, some sort of special abstract heaven, then Christ is there. Christ is the truth. But the priority-wise, the target is it's Jesus Christ who is the truth, not the truth that is Jesus Christ in that way. But obviously, possibly, he's not separate from the truth. And I think this is how we have to take these kind of claims. So take them as, you could say, like rhetorical aspects to ask about the priority of two inseparable things, right? That's how I take it. And does that make sense to you, Joseph Anthony?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think I have much more to add to that. Like, you kind
this
of
was a thing
cracked it open.
Yeah, this was the thing, especially in the Quietist movement. The Jansenists see this kind of thing, and so you can mark yourself whether you really have true love if you desire to go to hell, and if you don't desire to go to hell, if that's God's will, then you don't actually love Him enough. And I think that got low. The church was like, that's too far. But this is early. That's later. That's the Jansenists are later in the 1700s. This is still early, in 1600s. We've still got late 1500s, 1600s. They haven't quite worked, but this becomes a problem. But right now, I think he's saying it very innocently. Okay. All right. What if you think you know what God's will is for you, but you don't want to do it? How could you find the strength? Is this struggle a sin? But Joseph Anthony, what do you think? If you think you know God's will, He wants me to do this, but I don't want to do it. What to make of this sort of situation?
And I think the Lord always invites us to things, and the Lord purifies our desires in a lot of ways. So if there's something where you're like, okay, I can see maybe I feel an attraction to follow Him. I want to use like vocational discernment as a paradigm here. This is not a strict thing. And I have no idea, Catherine, if this is what you're referencing or not. But there are times it's like, oh my gosh, like I feel the Lord calling me to, consecrated life or something along those lines. But I really don't want that. Like, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather have those things. I think it's the understanding too, is like to not be afraid of that invitation or the attraction to something that maybe isn't purely emotionally driven. To see that good there. And it's like, okay, I can actually confirm these attractions that, like, is this God's will? So I would say probably some of the actions to take to help with that is to make sure that you have, a good spiritual director. Like, talk to a priest about this in a sense that, like, the ability to discern God's will is not necessarily completely on our backs. And
everyone's gonna have a spiritual director now. That's for you, Anthony.
Yeah, this is a funny thing because we always kind of rail on the need for spiritual directors, but like talking to a priest on this and saying like, hey, this is what I'm understanding. Like, does this kind of, am I doing the right things? Am I quote unquote discerning the will of God appropriately? Like, having a good conversation with a priest or even nuns can be very, very helpful in that way. So and then to take small steps. Like, the Lord isn't going to like rip us out of something and throw us into the deep end and say, okay, deal with it. Like, you're like, I've never known how to swim. Like, what am I supposed to do here? The Lord does, support us, and it takes a lot of small steps, especially if there's something that's very intimidating or maybe fear-inducing. The Lord doesn't operate by fear. He doesn't necessarily scare us into doing His will. And to watch our desires slowly kind of evolve, and to the point that we do desire this will. So it might not start off with us like wanting this, but recognizing the fact that like, I think He's calling me to something that maybe not my entire heart desires fully, but to not be afraid to start in small ways and to see the desires kind of evolve in certain ways to maybe wanting it. But if they don't, like, we could white knuckle it and do the things and be like, well, this is the better, objectively better thing, but I want nothing to do with it. But because it's objectively better, I have to pursue it. I mean, if the Lord hasn't put these desires on your heart, just that might be the signal that it's not for you either. So it is a process too, and it's not just the simple like, well, always do the objective better thing because it's objectively better at all times, all places. And
I think it's right. And I like God being He does arrange marriages sometimes, and so you grow into loving this person, Him, because it's good for you. But also, if you find yourself, you're in this state of grace and you have absolutely no desire for something, but you're just doing it because someone told you to, or you have a sense of like, vocation's better objectively, or that kind of thing. It is true. But the subjective makes a big sense of like, is it better for you?
Right.
If it feels like you're just, fighting it out and suffering, I don't think that's just a bad way to discern a vocation. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to figure out: is this an arranged marriage situation? And it could be a small thing too, or is this a like, I think it's God's will for me, but by that I mean someone told me, or it just seems like something I should do. Should language, and this is coming from a Kantian, so like I'm very happy with shoulds and sollen and all of this. Exola, I should do this, or I ought to do this. In love, that's after you make a vow, yeah. But like, you love that particular person. If you've made a vow, yeah, you've got a promise. But until that point, I think that's religious life you got to be careful of. All right, what is up with Jesus falling all the time on the Via Dolorosa? It seems as if he can't carry his cross on his own. Well, the guy was tired, man. He struck a bit. Okay, is he modeling humility? How to accept help? Is he showing the reality of human physical frailty? What do you think he seems to be need to rely on others? All right, it's awesome. I've thought about this actually because I've been doing one of my penances this Lent has been doing the Stations of Cross on Friday, which I do enjoy. And you do 3 times, right? 3 times is the short thing. But when I've been meditating upon this, I don't know if the people have the same experience of this, is I take it's to remind you that like because he's falling for us, right? So he's endeavoring to be close to us in these particular ways. And so the falling for sin is, I take it to be matched with our own falls of sin. And the nice part about having it not just once or not just twice, but 3 times in there is that it's like, I'm continually doing this. Like, yes, here are more sins. Like I've just gotten a few more paces, and here he is falling again to represent or to somehow relate himself to my sins and remind me that I continue to need him because I keep falling. So I actually like why does he do it? I don't know. But that particular has come across to me as a valuable part of the Via Dolorosa, the Stations of the Cross, that he falls a lot because we fall a lot, and therefore he's there for us to accept that falling. That's been really helpful to me. Yeah, that's my thought about it.
Mine is kind of similar, but like my reflection on these the triple falls of the Lord are the fact that his falling wasn't an accident. It wasn't like he stubbed his toe and fell, but like he fell under the weight of sin, and sin is heavy. The cross was heavy, and I think for us, in a certain sense, it communicates to us hope, because there are, I've found pretty much with all of us, there's about 3 or 4 perennial temptations in our life, and we tend to fall repeatedly. And so like the Lord himself fell repeatedly as he carried that cross. And because of original sin and our human frailty and disordered passions and all of these other things, like we need to not look at sin as this like one and done thing. Oh, I did that sin, the Lord forgave me, and now I forget about it never. Like, it's not uncommon to fall, quote unquote, to sin repeatedly. And you look at the Lord carrying the cross, and he fell repeatedly on that journey towards his redemption, towards his crucifixion, and the total surrender and sacrifice of his life to the Father, which is once again emblematic of our earthly journey, is to make a sacrifice of our life, an oblation to the Father. And along that journey, there may be repeated falls, not like an accidental fall in that way. And so to not be scared, to me, it communicates the hope that we shouldn't be scared of repeated sins in that way.
Nice. Okay. From one of the kids, at the end of the world, does Satan get destroyed? Does hell? This child is particularly concerned with people suffering for all eternity. He feels the loving thing to do would be... Now, this is interesting. YouTube actually rejected the comment at this point. It would be to put them out of their misery at some point. It says it usually means that they think it's spam, which is bizarre to me because this would not be spam. So I wonder if it's like censoring to kind of put them out of their misery a bit. Anyway, so the question is, what happened? Why hell for eternity, whether for Satan or for other people in that way? I'm going to take a first stab at this. Well, it would seem like it would be merciful to do that. But here's the thing, is that Satan and the boys want it that way. right? This is hard to get, but Satan especially, he doesn't want God to kill him. He hates God. Hell is lit up by the flames of his hatred and hatred for God, the rubbing against the divine mercy of God and their hatred and rejection of it. So the rejection has this friction matter of it. And so actually, he's not interested in that. He's not asking for mercy. He's rejected that. He's not interested. So this is his thing, right?
This is his decision, and this is what he wants.
Yeah, and he's an angel, so he's not worried about. He knows what he is, and he knows it's forever, and he knows this kind of stuff, so he does it. Now, why? Mystery. I have some thoughts, but we'll leave it for that. But for humans now, it's interesting because humans, of course, we're not the kind of power sinners you could say that the fallen angels are, right? Because we don't know what we're about. We make mistakes, this kind of thing. He doesn't make mistakes. He clear eyes it. But so for us, it seems like it would be merciful for us to be annihilated. Now he can't kill us because we're immaterial substances, and so he can annihilate us in the sense of ending that. One reason I suppose would be that it would be a derogation of his creation in the sense that he's made a mistake in creating something immortal and not letting it live its term out immortally. So we're created as spiritual substances with bodies, but that live for eternity, right? And so it would actually it would be against his wisdom, since he created us for eternity, to then change the plan on that metaphysically. That's not probably as interesting as something I don't think they want it either. In the sense that they're people in league with Satan. Now you might think, my gosh, who could possibly want that? I don't know, but
yeah,
you could do it. You could totally do it.
It's possible. Yeah, it's totally possible.
That's my I mean, I have more thoughts, but this one's a tough one to add because, and Thomas Aquinas believed that most people, a lot of people, many people went to hell and were damned for eternity, and it didn't really. This problem did not bother him that much, and that's not because I take it he was an inattentive person to the human condition and human misery and such, and he was just kind of a real jerk. I just think he had a different vision. He just saw things from a different perspective than we did. We were inundated with a sort of make sure that you treat your dog nicely and make sure that they have little shoes on when they're walking out at the cold and stuff. We're more sensitive to things. That's for good and bad. And so I think this question raises for us in a way that it doesn't raise. I think it's partly because St. Thomas Aquinas and the early thinkers, the Christian thinkers, you could say, take your choice really seriously. They think it matters. And so we think everyone just kind of screws up, makes mistakes, so God can fix crap. No, God respects your freedom. Just like Satan, he respects your freedom. If you say, you know what, God, I'm not interested for you and living with you forever, and he's like, that's what you decide, and I really respect that. It's the same thing if you choose well, that you're merited. So I think they just understood that persons were a lot more important than we do. We tend to think it's just kind of suffering matter stuff. And so they thought the will was really important. They thought people's choices were important to be respected, and God will respect your freedom. He will respect it because he created it. That's my thought. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. This is for you, Joseph Anthony. Do you think that Mary and Joseph bickered? I'm thinking particularly of when they lose Jesus and they stressed out. It seems from the scriptures Joseph was pretty exasperated. I'm wondering if Mary was chirping all of that, Joseph, for his chaotic travel record. Do you think they thought, rut row, we're in trouble now, we lost the whole Savior, and then they freak out? They do think that they question taking on such a monumental task for even a minute. Funny question.
Yeah, I like the chirping at it. Mary is like a NHL hockey player just chirping at the opposing team.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I know traveling always kind of brings out the worst of people and puts people on edge, and they're always bickering about it. Do I think they bickered? I don't think so. No. I mean, no, I mean, there's some of those funny jokes about the interior life of the Holy Family. If anything went wrong, Mary and Jesus look at Joseph. It's well, it's not us. We're not the ones, I don't think it's anything along those lines. I don't think they bickered. I think they did experience anguish like they experience anguish at losing the Lord. But I don't think they like bickered about it and faulted each other or blamed each other for that type of thing. But I think they experienced a shared anguish of losing the Lord. And I think that definitely was a real experience and a very emotional experience for that. But I don't think it was anything where they blamed each other for the problems of that. I don't think it was the kind of petty bickering of travel woes or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Right. That's totally right. Yeah, I hope not. Okay, let's see. Is it poor practice to journal through Mass, not about random things, in response to the readings or after receiving communion? Never mind. Okay,
if two Protestants journal,
yeah, exactly. Two Protestants. We'll get to that in a second.
I think journaling is a beautiful form of prayer. I know it's not my preferred form of prayer, but I think it can very much help people. There's some of those really ancient sayings like the mind is made clear through the tip of a pen. And so it can really help to focus people's prayer and articulation of what's going on inside their heart. So do I think it's bad for that? I think it can have its place, to write down a few notes from the homily or a few things there. I think like a continuous journaling through the Mass, probably not the best idea. But if there's a few moments, whether that's in your post-communion meditation or after the homily or readings, to have a few moments to kind of process, or maybe you decide not to do it during Mass, but to do it as your Thanksgiving after Mass, that might be a more appropriate place. But I don't think it's exactly counter the Mass. I do think it's important to be attentive to the Mass. So if it's assisting your attentiveness to the scripture readings or to the prayers, there are some really, really beautiful prayers, in the ordinary of the Mass or in the Eucharistic prayer, that I think sometimes we hear them so regularly that we forget them or we gloss over them. And so maybe to allow ourselves to actually be attentive to those prayers can be helpful, in the sense of like, let's journal at the end of Mass. But if I'm too concerned about journaling through it, then I might miss some of those beautiful prayers. So, but I think on occasion, it's not a bad activity, especially if it's helping you actually be attentive and engage with the
remind yourself quickly. You might jot one thought down maybe for the homily, right, or something that came with the readings. I took notes during when I was a Protestant, because the homilies were 30 minutes long, so it was basically a lecture. But in the Catholic Church, it could be distracting. But if it helps to like keep you focused on things, to have something like that, maybe it can distract people around you. So it's good. It's like using computers and things around you to be aware of that too. And not computers in the Mass, but I'm thinking about like class or something. People are like, well, but I need the computer. It's like, but does the other person next to you need it? Because they're going to be looking at your screen too. So that's going to be attentive to. All right. If two Protestants who are married but have both been divorced previously want to enter the church, canonical question. What steps would they need to take to have their marriage recognized and regularized within the church? All right. Two Protestants who are married, I take it they're baptized. Protestants, not like evangelicals. So they haven't been baptized. So say it's baptized correctly. They've been married. Now, have they been divorced previously? So they were divorced maybe before, and then they both got married out of the divorce. Is that the issue here? So it's like, it's two Protestants. Okay, I think that's right. So they're both married separately and divorced those marriages. So A and B were married. So A and B were married. C and D were married. A and B separated, divorced. C and D separated, divorced. A and C are getting married. They do marry, and then they want to join the Catholic Church. So,
talk to a canon lawyer. That's what I say.
That's a tricky one. If
talk to a priest, and they'll walk you through it with the canon lawyer, because I think this is like,
they're going to have the first. They're going to have to make sure the first, if they're married as baptized Christians, the first marriages are sacramental marriages, and therefore they have the bond, they have the unity, so they have to have those annulled. So unless someone's died or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Especially if somebody's passed away. Yeah. Excuse me. But I think it's important to remember, like, the church envisions and sees a sacramental marriage as being between two baptized.
Yeah.
Right. That it's between
That's
two
key.
baptized.
So if one of those earlier ones wasn't, so say they married someone who wasn't baptized, and that wasn't a valid marriage, you just get a quick, you have to have, the canon, you have the what do you call it, the chancery make a determination on this, but that's an easier one to figure out because it wasn't a sacramental marriage. You just gotta make sure the sacramental marriage has never happened. If you have a sacramental marriage, that's not going away. So even if it's a Protestant, it's not, even if it's a Protestant one, it's still baptized. We're baptized.
And I think that's important that the church sees that even a marriage between two baptized Protestants that are, can convey the sacraments or can convey grace. So, if two individuals are Protestants and they get married outside the church, let's now use another hypothetical situation. Let's say it's their first marriage, but they, two baptized get married outside the church, and then they both join the church. Let's say at the Easter Vigil, they make their profession of faith and join the church. Then that marriage becomes valid upon entering the church, right? Because the sacraments is communicated between two baptized. So that's there's some nuances. I would say for whatever situation that you're specifically thinking about, contact a priest, sit down with them, work through it with a canon lawyer. It seems like there's a lot of kind of nuance.
That's a lot of nuance to that one. It's tricky. It depends on how many people are baptized in the earlier marriages and such for that kind of thing. But if you got yourself two baptized Protestants, then their marriage has to be dealt with in a different way than say if it was unbaptized people. So have a go at that. Okay, Passion Night was basically the first Easter egg hunt. Jesus, the Easter egg, hit himself, and the angry mob hunted him down. There it is, hilarious.
Oh my gosh!
Hey, bros.
Did you just say Jesus is the first Easter egg?
First Easter egg there is. I'll never have a normal Lent. Fair enough. Could never drink coffee black. The heartburns too much. That's fair enough. I love a hot shower. Yeah, but a steaming, scalding hot shower. Who knows? Your mama's boy. Is it fine to just say that I hate Lent? All of it. It's just the worst.
Yes.
It's totally fine to say that. That's
I'm right there with you. Your mama's boy.
My mom feels the same way. She hates Lent. She gets into it at some point, but she just hates it at the start. Just hates it. And I'm not my favorite. Not my favorite.
I'm not a Lent guy, but I love the profile pic of your mama's boy, Allen Iverson. So you know what? I'm right there.
There it is. Ipso Brazzo, wearing Crocs, all of Lent is my penance. That's everyone else's penance too, though. You don't want to penance other people with your Crocs. Okay, I get it though. Okay, fine. Oh, interesting. Oh, Billy Newton.
What up, Billy?
I'm thinking about being Catholic, Amish, put up with mass buggy, whatever. Yeah, Amish are cool. 2 shows. This is just crazy. It's not live. Matt Frad is exactly right. Does he do a live Q&A? I don't know if he does. Who knows?
I don't know.
I'm intrigued by the Friars setting their own communal Lenten practices. That's fair enough. Yeah, that's like I said. It's good to do that. We do it as communal stuff, and we get together and talk about it. And usually, it's a lot of times it's just like, what did we do last year? When does that work? What do we want to tweak? Fix this stuff? Do we want to add more silence? Do we actually have too much silence? That was actually hard to kind of. It's just too onerous on us in this sort of way, or wasn't helpful for the community, that kind of stuff. Alcohol policies, this kind of stuff. It's just a good chance for us to check in with each other and remind ourselves about the higher calling, which is great.
We sometimes add different prayers, like right before dinner, like when the community gathers, and we'll do like an additional prayer or something like that. Communal penances are nice, or Lenten practices.
To choose. I'm wedging a barn door in the country to get a signal. Currently, the temp is 27 degrees. Fair enough. That's how much I love you. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's fantastic. Okay. Father of 5. Here we go. Do Dominicans have any physical chores to do, like yard work and laundry while in formation? Do you have any friendly initiation-esque type of things? We do. We do. Yes. We do a lot of. So we do a ton of mulching. In novitiate. It's probably the novice master, I suppose, but Father Joseph Anthony and I and all of the God's Point Friars were in the same novitiate. That's why we're here together. And we had a guy, so we had Father James Sullivan who took us for garden parties, which meant mulching. So we did a lot of mulching,
field trips to a field to do yard work.
Stuff. Yard work, laundry stuff. We do have to take care of our own stuff, our own habits. We don't make them; that would be a disaster. We have to make sure they're clean and make sure all of our clothes are clean. We do cook. We do learn how to do that, so we can cook in communities if we're in small communities. It's not as much work, you could say, as a lot of it's like we're thinkers, so it's not as much physical labor and stuff. But the wood of the desk is the wood of the cross for us.
Right.
Yeah.
But we do different things to kind of keep the priory operational. Like there are certain things that, like, especially in the larger communities, like the house of studies or the novitiate, where you have a number of guys that aren't necessarily going out of the house to do different pastoral work or apostolic endeavors, that they can spend some time supporting the operations of the priory. So whether that's sorting mail on a regular basis or cleaning the bathrooms and cleaning common spaces and things like that. So there's a lot of those kind of like
little chores, basically
domestic duties that some of the student brothers will take on, or the novices will take on as a way to kind of help the operations of the life of the priory itself.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. Your mama's boy says, what's your favorite thing about your province? Oh, that's cool. Ooh. For me, it's the brothers, I suppose. I like the brothers in my province. I know that's not really that's just a trivial answer, but the province, because all Dominicans are we have the same constitution, same kind of structures, things, but our province is simpatico. I'm appreciative of the brothers in the province. I do like. We're having a provincial assembly this summer, and so we're all gonna be together in Washington D.C. for a couple of days. So there'll be tons of Dominicans in Washington D.C. if you want to see a fun time, and that'll be great. Just good to see everybody. So I guess the people. You, Father Joseph Anthony?
I mean, I would definitely share the same thing as like. I have found the reasons you join the order are not necessarily the reasons you stay, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, right? I had a certain type of romanticism about Dominican life and the province and things like that, and then after living it for a while, you're kind of like, can see through some of that. But I would say, the reasons that I stayed is definitely the brothers. And knowing that you share a life with each other, and even if you're in different locations and things like that. So I definitely say the brothers, and seeing the great variety of the skill sets, the personalities, the talents of the brothers is very edifying, because you're like, oh my gosh, these guys are top notch and they could do anything, and yet they're living for the Lord. So the fraternal life for us is so very interesting, and so very important to make sure that we have a robust fraternal life, but that we actually love the brethren in their faults and failings, but also in their glories and successes.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just looking for something here. Okay. I'm going to get Alexa because it's coming up here. It says, Father Bonaventure, Ashdelin, do you have a favorite quote from Sister Faustina's diary? I'm saying Faustina's diary. I mean, I love so much of it. My favorite passage is 962 or 959? 961. That's what it was. Where she says she's been completing her morning exercises, and she says, "O most holy Trinity, dwelling in my heart, I beg you grant the grace of conversion to as many souls as the numbers of stitches that I will make today with this crochet hook." I love that. I would never say. I've never prayed that prayer. But and then she has a little conversation back and forth with him. He's like, "I can't do that. It's too much." No, this is all I can do. So it's little is much more. Hey. Doing things for little things is harder than doing big things. He goes, "Fine, I'll do it." Okay. But that's a little passage. But I do love the. There's a 303 is beautiful. Around the 270s to the 370s, there's really a lot in there. So great love. 303 can change small things into great ones, and it is only love which lends value to our actions. And the purer our love becomes, the less there will be within us for the flames of suffering to feed upon. And the suffering will cease to be suffering for us. It will become a delight. I love that. She says something about the suffering is the thermometer of love. We only suffer for friends. And then there's this beautiful meditation recently. So 373, this is near page 157, 158 of the diary, where in the Polish, she's meditating upon St. Ignatius Loyola's fundamental principle, where he says, we are indifferent to all things, and we serve God. Our purpose is to serve God and to save our souls in this way. And she meditated on this, and she says, in the fundamental meditation about the goal of St. Ignatius, that is of choosing love. The soul must love. It has need of loving. The soul must divert the stream of its love, but not into the mud or into a vacuum, but into God. How I rejoice when I reflect on this, for I feel certain clearly that he himself is in my heart. Just Jesus alone. I love creatures insofar as they help me to become united with God. I love all people because I see the image of God in them. I love that because it's a sort of like a feminine reflection and meditation, a completion of the Ignatian model of the I serve and obey. And it's about, she sees that as love, a loving service. and that takes us to the cross kind of business, because God's love and salvation for us on the cross is a matter of so loving obedience. Liebesgehorsam in Deutsch, in German. So you put this together. Liebes is German, Liebes, like ich liebe dich, I love you. And then Gehorsam is obedience. So Liebesgehorsam, the loving obedience, is kind of one thing. And I take it that she's been reflecting on Ignatius's principle of like obeying all things, but that she turns this into that has to be love, because obeying is a matter of uniting your will to the other. And the only way you can unite your will to God is by loving him, right? The other one is to reject him. So that's a beautiful, that's 373. And then 303 is beautiful. 301, greatest aptitude, blah, blah. Miwa shared it. There's just plenty of them there. But recently I really loved that, because she doesn't say it's Ignatius. You have to know it. You have to know that she's in a Jesuit retreat, and you have a sense that what's here happened to the foundation. You can see with the indifference to creatures. So I found that, and I was just blown away by it.
That's okay. That's wild. That's beautiful, though.
I got to work on really on that. I'm trying to write on how Faustinianism is the completion of Ignatian spirituality. But here we go. Ooh. Does anyone give up golf for Lent? I certainly don't, because I don't play golf in general. I do play golf, but I don't get to play it much often. But do you give up golf for Lent, just Van?
I have to say, I have not been golfing since I moved to New York City. So in effect, I have. It's accidental. It's accidental. I haven't intentionally. But it is Masters Week. It's Masters Week this week, and I'm so excited for it. The par 3 competition was today. The tournament kicks off tomorrow, so I'm super excited about that. So I haven't been golfing myself, but I've definitely been watching golf and keeping up with the tour and things like that. So, but it's Masters Week. Get excited. Gotta love it.
Okay, I remember growing up watching the Masters. Dun, 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 dun. I remember that little theme.
It's a tradition like any other.
It is.
Augusta. It's so good.
Superficial observer, last question. How should religious balance joy and compunction? That's a great question. Joy
and compunction.
Yeah, so like feeling sorrow, but also feeling joyful. I mean, I take it you take them in turns. That you make sure that you're doing both of them, that you're praying the sorrowful and the joyful mysteries depending on the day. And that that you accept them as they come, that when sorrow comes and sort of thing, you're not willing to reject it. And when joy comes, you're not willing to reject that either. I take it the part of the poverty of spirit is that we receive whatever we get, and we accept whatever we have. So it's a matter of trusting in God's providence and his work in your life and the situations that get there. So I think just a balancing out of what seems natural. I don't think you need to like force yourself to be joyful, nor force yourself to be sorrowful, but rather he's doing this dance with you and you're open to him and his moves in that way.
I find myself always kind of cringing a little bit when people say, like, how do you balance this? And I found just more and more in my life, like, I'm not interested in balance. Like, I don't think the world's balanced in any sense. I'm not a dualist, and I don't think there's like, equal amounts of good and evil. Yeah, I know you are. But I always prefer the image of harmony more than balance. Right. And like, there's a time to, have compunction. And that's fine. And there's also a time to be joyful, and that's fine too. So it's kind of like just receiving it as it comes, but thinking maybe a little more into harmony, that my joy at this moment isn't taking away my compunction, and my compunction isn't taking away my joy. It's just at different moments we need to harmonize them in different ways, instead of saying like, oh, I've spent 3 days being joyful, and now I have to really like remind myself of what a wretch I am for the next 4 days.
We can do this. We got 2 more questions quick and then we're done. What other order would you have joined if you couldn't be Dominicans, and why? I actually don't, I don't know. No, I love being a Dominican, and I carry. I don't have it with me. I usually carry around an Ignatius Loyola card with me. I love the Jesuits; they're great guys. Franciscans are obviously boss, but like I couldn't imagine being another order, right? I just couldn't do it. No, it's good to know. Okay, pros and cons of having friends who are different beliefs of you, especially the belief in contraceptions. Pro is, I guess, it sharpens your arguments and might get them to saved. Cons is you have someone who doesn't believe in things that you do. I can't think if there's any reason like a pro to like you. Pros and cons, like I'm not going to choose to have. Oh, it's good to have these guys around. It's a pro for them that you're there, that you have, and by different beliefs, you mean like the right beliefs. So to help them to come to understand the dignity of the human person, and the dignity and the call of the sexual act, and the relationship of personal self-love, giving personal giving and all that kind of stuff. So that's great.
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's good to have some pagan friends in your life from time to time, because that way you're not living in a vacuum, and like you remind yourself that humanity is real and that there's really a lot of different humanity out there. So to not be afraid to deal with people, or maybe even build friendships with those that differ a little bit, but to have that
fair enough.
like you said, to be able to share your faith with them in that way.
Yeah, ideally you wouldn't have anyone who's a friend that shares a different belief than you, but not because you avoided someone, but because no one did.
Right.
So the only way you can make that true is actually by being friends with people like that and bringing them Jesus Christ. Superficial thing. Thank you, Father. And here, Billy Newton. So that's it for us. This Livesplaining. Thanks for tuning in, and please subscribe to the podcast. Leave a review, like, subscribe wherever you find these sort of things. If you'd like to make a monthly donation to us, we'd love that on Patreon/godsplaining.org/thing. And yeah, share this around and know of our prayers for you, especially during this Lenten season. Please pray for us, and we will catch you next time on Godsplaining.